Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
Have you ever been completely relaxed, finally ready to sleep at 11 p.m., and then, ping, your heart sinks, your stomach knots. It's an urgent email from your boss. In today's story, we follow Arthur, a dedicated employee who is slowly losing his mind to the toxic pressure of 24/7 work culture. We're going to look at the real-life struggle of digital burnout, how to set professional boundaries, and at the same time, we will learn powerful English vocabulary, phrasal verbs, and idioms used in the modern workplace. Grab a notebook, listen closely to Arthur's journey, and let's dive into Chapter 1.
It was 10:55 p.m., and the bedroom was completely dark, except for the soft blue glow of Arthur's phone on the nightstand. He lay under the covers, staring at the ceiling, waiting. He tried to practice deep breathing, a technique his doctor suggested to help him relax. He inhaled slowly, held it, and exhaled. But his muscles refused to loosen. His mind was spinning, running through the endless tasks of his corporate job. He was utterly exhausted, yet his brain refused to shut down. He had been tossing and turning for nearly an hour. Then, at exactly 11 p.m., the silence broke. Ping! The sound was sharp, metallic, and instantly recognizable. The screen flared to life, casting a harsh light across the room. Arthur's heart rate spiked instantly. A cold knot formed in his stomach. Without thinking, his hand reached out and grabbed the device. His thumb tapped the screen, and the face recognition unlocked it immediately. It was an email from Victoria, his manager. The subject line was written in all capital letters, "Urgent data correction needed for tomorrow." Arthur felt a wave of absolute dread. His chest felt tight, and he was suddenly on edge, his peaceful bedroom transformed into a high-stress office cubicle. He knew he was burning the candle at both ends. He worked 10-hour days, skipped lunch, and yet here he was, expected to log back in at midnight. He stared at the glowing text, his eyes burning from fatigue. If he ignored it, he wouldn't sleep a wink out of fear. If he answered it, he would be up for hours. Slowly, he sat up in bed.
The next morning, the bright office lights felt like needles in Arthur's tired eyes. He walked into the building at 8:30 a.m., clutching a large cup of black coffee. His hands were shaking slightly from a lack of sleep. He'd stayed up until 1 a.m. fixing that urgent spreadsheet for Victoria. He sat down at his desk and immediately opened his laptop to see the response. There was no thank you email waiting for him. In fact, there was no reply at all. Arthur took a deep breath and decided to walk over to Victoria's office to check in. He found her casually chatting with another manager about her weekend plans. "Good morning, Victoria," Arthur said, trying to keep his voice calm and professional. "I finished that urgent data correction you emailed about last night." Victoria looked up from her conversation, looking confused for a second. "Oh, right, the spreadsheet," she said, waving her hand carelessly. "Thanks, Arthur. Just drop it in the shared folder. The client meeting isn't until next Tuesday anyway." Arthur froze, a sudden rush of heat rising to his face. Next Tuesday? He had sacrificed his sleep, his peace of mind, and his health for something that wasn't due for 5 days. It was a complete fiction. The emergency did not exist. Later, during lunch, Arthur sat with his colleague Marcus in the break room. Arthur sighed and poked at his food, feeling completely drained.
Victoria emailed me at 11 p.m. again last night, Arthur said, shaking his head. It turns out the task wasn't even critical. I feel like I'm running on empty. Low-hanging fruit of corporate culture, Marcus said, taking a sip of his energy drink. Around here, you have to drop everything when management rings. If you want to move up the ladder, you have to show you are always available. It's just the savagery of corporate life. You either accept it or you get left behind. Arthur looked around the bustling break room at his tired, stressed co-workers. Everyone seemed to accept this toxic 24/7 expectation as completely normal. He realized with a sinking feeling that the problem wasn't just a single email. The entire workplace culture was designed to slowly consume his entire life.
Friday evening finally arrived, and the warm lights of the restaurant felt inviting. Arthur was sitting at a corner table with 3 of his closest friends. The table was filled with delicious food, and the sound of laughter echoed around him. It was supposed to be a night to unwind, to laugh, and to finally catch up. But Arthur was barely there. His phone sat face up on the table, right next to his water glass. Every few seconds, Arthur's eyes flicked downward to check the dark screen. "So, Arthur, are you planning to join us for the hiking trip next month?" his friend Sarah asked. Arthur blinked, suddenly pulling his eyes away from the phone. "Oh, sorry, what did you say?" Arthur stammered, feeling a blush of embarrassment. He had completely zoned out during her story, his mind trapped in office anxiety. "I asked about the hiking trip," Sarah repeated, her smile fading into a look of concern. "You seem a million miles away tonight, Arthur." Just then, a notification banner flashed on his phone screen. It wasn't an email, just a generic news update. But the sudden light made Arthur's heart rate spike instantly. His hand twitched on the table, desperately wanting to grab the device. He felt a cold sweat on his palms as he forced his hand to stay still. He was physically sitting with his friends, but mentally he was a ghost at the dinner table. He couldn't focus on the conversation, and he kept misinterpreting simple questions. Every laugh from his friends felt distant, like it was happening in another room. He realized with a shock that he was losing his ability to connect with the people he loved. The toxic pressure from work wasn't just ruining his sleep anymore. It was actively rewriting his brain, making him a stranger to his own life. He looked at his friends' happy, relaxed faces and felt a deep sense of loneliness. The digital leash around his neck was tightening, and it was pulling him away from reality.
Saturday afternoon was bright and clear, the perfect day for a walk in the local park. Arthur had made a brave decision before leaving his apartment. He left his phone on the kitchen counter. He wanted to feel free, to breathe fresh air without looking at a screen. He walked along the paved path, watching the green leaves move gently in the wind. For the first 15 minutes, he felt a strange, light sensation in his chest. Then the psychological trap snapped shut. As he walked past a bench, he heard a short, sharp electronic sound. Ping! Arthur stopped dead in his tracks, his heart hammering against his ribs. His right hand automatically slapped his empty pocket, searching for the device. He looked around frantically, but there was nobody near him except an old man reading a newspaper. There was no phone, and there was no notification. It was a hallucination, a phantom ring created entirely by his own stressed mind. Arthur stood frozen on the path, his hands trembling as a heavy silence returned to the park. He realized he was hyper-vigilant, his brain constantly waiting for a threat that wasn't there. The toxic work culture had rewired his nervous system so deeply that he couldn't even enjoy a quiet Saturday afternoon. A tight, painful knot formed in his stomach as he walked slowly toward a nearby wooden bench. He sat down, burying his face in his hands, feeling utterly defeated by his own mind. The lack of a physical phone didn't stop the internal anxiety from racing through his body. He couldn't keep living like a soldier in a digital war zone, waiting for the next midnight attack. He needed to make a drastic change before the phantom rings drove him completely crazy. On Monday afternoon, Arthur stood outside Victoria's office, taking a deep, steadying breath. He had scheduled a one-on-one meeting, determined to address the late-night notifications. He knocked gently on the glass door, and Victoria waved him inside without looking up from her screen. "Come in, Arthur. What's on your mind?" she asked, typing rapidly on her keyboard. Arthur sat down in the chair opposite her desk, his hands clasped tightly together. "Thank you for seeing me, Victoria," Arthur began, keeping his tone measured and professional. "I wanted to speak with you regarding the late-night emails, specifically the ones arriving around 11 p.m. Receiving these urgent messages right before bed is starting to have a severe impact on my health and sleep." Victoria stopped typing, looked up, and leaned back in her chair with a dismissive smile. "Arthur, we are a fast-paced company handling high-profile clients," she said smoothly. "Those emails aren't meant to punish you. They are a sign of our team's passion and dedication. We send information when it's fresh in our minds, and we expect our top players to be responsive." Arthur felt a familiar tightness in his chest, recognizing the corporate jargon immediately. "With all due respect, Victoria, responding at midnight is not sustainable for me anymore," Arthur countered, trying to stand his ground. "The data correction last week could have easily waited until the morning without affecting the project." Victoria sighed softly, adjusting her glasses as if dealing with a difficult child. "I appreciate your perspective, Arthur, but flexibility is a core value of this department," she replied coldly. "If you want to grow here, you need to show you can handle the rhythm of leadership." Arthur left her office minutes later, feeling completely defeated, frustrated, and gaslit. His manager had successfully framed a toxic, round-the-clock expectation as a simple test of his commitment.
By Thursday afternoon, the office atmosphere was thick with tension as a major project deadline approached. The late-night pings had escalated from a single message into a non-stop barrage of digital noise. Arthur's phone was buzzing constantly, vibrating against his desk like a mechanical insect. He had survived on less than 4 hours of sleep each night for the past week. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin was pale, and he felt like he was running on fumes. The endless pressure culminated on Friday morning during a high-stakes presentation to the company's most important client. The room was packed with senior executives, and Victoria sat at the front, watching Arthur closely. Arthur stood at the podium, clicking through the financial slides with sweaty hands. As he reached the final critical summary page, a sudden silence fell over the room. The main client frowned, leaning forward to squint at the massive projector screen. "Arthur, these projected profit margins seem completely wrong," the client said, crossing his arms. Arthur looked at the numbers, and a wave of icy panic crashed over his entire body. In his deep state of exhaustion the night before, he had completely misplaced a decimal point. It was a massive, uncharacteristic blunder that made the company look completely unprofessional. Victoria's face turned instantly red with anger, her eyes boring into Arthur from across the room. Arthur stammered an apology, his mind spinning as he tried to explain the data slip. He felt utterly humiliated.
his professional reputation crumbling in front of the entire department. The relentless midnight expectations hadn't made him a better worker. They had finally broken him. The humiliation from the presentation mistake burned in Arthur's mind all through the weekend. By Wednesday evening, he knew he had reached a dangerous crossroads regarding his health and his career. He sat on his living room couch at 8:55 p.m., staring intensely at the small smartphone in his hand. His heart was pounding hard against his ribs as if he were preparing to jump off a cliff. At exactly 9 p.m., Arthur pressed the power button and held it down firmly. The screen displayed a prompt, and with a trembling thumb, he tapped "Power Off." The glowing display faded into a deep, reflective blackness, and the room became incredibly quiet. Arthur set the lifeless device on the kitchen counter, feeling a sudden wave of sharp panic. What if Victoria emails right now about an emergency? What if my colleagues think I'm being lazy or disrespectful? For the first 2 hours, the digital withdrawal symptoms tore through his mind, creating terrifying what-if scenarios. He paced around his living room, his hands twitching automatically, missing the comforting weight of the plastic device. But as the clock struck midnight, a strange, forgotten feeling began to settle over the quiet apartment. There was no sudden light, no metallic buzz, and no sudden spike in his heart rate. He climbed into bed at 11:15 p.m., his mind free from the anticipation of an attack. For the first time in over a year, Arthur fell into a deep, uninterrupted, and restorative sleep. The next morning, the sun was shining brightly through the window when Arthur woke up at 7:30 a.m. He walked into the kitchen, his body feeling remarkably light after a full night of deep sleep. He picked up his phone from the counter and pressed the power button, bracing himself for the digital storm. The screen flashed to life, and a barrage of notifications instantly flooded the display. There were 14 missed emails, 3 urgent chat messages, and a missed call from Victoria sent at 11:15 p.m. The latest email from his manager read, "Arthur, where are you? We need the client correction finalized immediately." Arthur felt a brief moment of the old anxiety try to grip his throat, but he quickly pushed it away. He arrived at the office at 8:30 a.m., walking down the hallway with a calm, deliberate pace. As soon as he sat at his desk, Victoria appeared at his cubicle, her face tight with intense frustration. "Arthur, my office, right now," she said coldly, turning around without waiting for a reply. Arthur stood up, picked up his notepad, and followed her into the quiet room, closing the door behind him. "Why was your phone off last night during a critical project update?" Victoria demanded, leaning over her desk. Arthur sat down, looked her directly in the eyes, and maintained a calm, steady composure. "Victoria, my working hours end at 6 p.m., Arthur said, drawing a clear line in a firm voice. "Working until midnight is causing sleep deprivation, which directly led to my data blunder last week. In order to ensure high-quality results for our clients, I need to protect my rest, so my phone will be off every night at 9 p.m. Victoria stared at him, completely shocked by his sudden transformation and his calm professional limits. She opened her mouth to argue, but Arthur's quiet confidence gave her absolutely no room to push back.
Arthur's bold stand in Victoria's office created a quiet sensation across the department. Over the next few days, he held his ground completely, turning his phone off at 9 p.m. every single night. At first, a few of his closest colleagues looked at him with a mixture of shock and resentment. They were still answering late-night messages, and they worried Arthur's absence would increase their own workloads. But Arthur didn't let the peer pressure change his mind. He arrived at 8:30 a.m. sharp, fully rested and highly focused. Because his brain was finally functioning properly, his morning productivity skyrocketed. He was catching errors before they happened, solving complex data problems, and bringing fresh energy to team meetings. During a lunch break on Thursday, Marcus sat down next to him, looking completely exhausted. "Victoria sent 3 updates after midnight," Marcus muttered, rubbing his bloodshot eyes. "How are you not getting fired right now, Arthur? What's your secret?" Arthur smiled gently and took a sip of his water. "I just decided that my health isn't a negotiable item for this company. And look at my work this week. It's the best it has been in months because I am actually sleeping." Marcus stared at his sandwich, a sudden look of realization washing over his tired face. By Monday, a quiet catalyst had begun to transform the office dynamics. Marcus and 2 other analysts decided to follow Arthur's lead, turning off their work notifications at 9 p.m. too. A powerful wave of solidarity was forming among the staff, forcing management to realize that well-rested employees produced far better results. 3 months later, a gentle summer rain tapped against the bedroom window as the clock crept toward 11 p.m. The room was peaceful, illuminated only by the warm, amber glow of a small bedside lamp. Arthur sat propped up against his pillows, deeply engrossed in a gripping mystery novel. His smartphone was not on the nightstand. It was resting on the kitchen counter downstairs, completely powered down. As the clock struck midnight, the absolute silence in the bedroom remained completely unbroken. There was no flashing blue light, no metallic buzz, and no sudden spike of cortisol in his chest. Arthur closed his book, reached over to switch off the lamp, and slipped easily into a deep, restful sleep. The next morning at 9:30 a.m., Arthur was at his desk sipping hot coffee when a notification popped up on his screen. It was a direct message from Victoria, sent just a few minutes prior during official working hours. The message read, "Arthur, when you have a moment today, please review the new client portfolio. No rush." Arthur smiled to himself, noting the complete absence of capital letters and artificial urgency. By standing his ground and drawing a clear line, he hadn't just saved his own mental health. He had forced a stubborn corporate system to adapt to human limits, reclaiming his dignity and his peace of mind. He looked out the office window at the bright morning sky, finally feeling like the master of his own life.
Arthur's journey reminds us that the digital world can easily take over our lives if we let it. The constant ping of our phones is not just a sound, it is a demand for our time, our energy, and our mental peace. By learning to say no and drawing clear professional boundaries, Arthur did not lose his job. Instead, he gained something far more valuable: his health, his happiness, and his freedom. True success in life is not about being available 24 hours a day. It is about finding a healthy balance, protecting your mind, and knowing when to completely disconnect from the digital noise. And that brings us to the end of today's story. Have you ever felt the same pressure Arthur felt, waiting for that late-night notification? Let me know in the comments below how you handle toxic work stress and digital burnout. If you want to keep improving your English listening skills and learn more real-life vocabulary, don't forget to check out the description for today's key phrases. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of your health, and I will see you in the next story.
Goodbye.